Welcome to the ODDSBREAKER'S #1 place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 24 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow us on Twitter at The ODDSBREAKERS and follow us on all social media /The ODDSBREAKERS. This episode is being brought to you by jazzsports.ag. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit Jazz Sports. Use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply, and location. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the podcast, we'd love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member for $17.99 a month. You can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. If you'd like to make any donations, please visit Patreon. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. We have a fantastic show for you today, my friends. We recap the NFL draft with Mr. Doug Upstone from Docs Sports. So very excited to do that. Doug also has been doing well in horse racing. He's going to talk a little bit about some strategy and some beginner's strategy if you just kind of want to pass the time, look at a horse racing card and not feel like you have to be too heavily invested to have a good time playing it. As for the draft itself, I thought it was a great experience, really, watching everybody from home doing it. The NFL did a fantastic job. As far as betting it, day one didn't go quite as well until the very end of day one, and day two actually went very well for us to become slightly profitable in the draft. So can't wait to recap that because there's some teams that I thought did very well in this draft, and I thought there were some teams that did not do well at all. So without further ado, let's bring on Doug Upstone to recap this NFL draft.
All right, and now I'm very excited to welcome back a fantastic handicapper and friend to the show, Mr. Doug Upstone from DocSports.com. Lots going on, Doug. How you been doing through these crazy times the last couple months?
It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. And like a lot of other people, staying home, doing what everybody says is right, or not everybody, I guess, but enough people say that's right. And I, like most people, I don't want to get sick.
No one does. No one does, man.
So it's just, hey, you know what? It's the way it is, and we just figure out a way. And even though our sports have been certainly deprived, you got to make adjustments. You got to keep going. And I've been fortunate enough, a couple of the places that I work for and other areas, been able to do a lot of writing. And so that's been a big plus for me. And so that's been good. And, just keeps everything mentally flowing at the same time.
Absolutely. And many of us were fortunate enough to work from home beforehand. So it's not that much of a physical change. And yes, sports have gone away, but there are some things out there that help you out and help guys like me out and some other people. You've been focusing more on horse racing and things like that and being successful. So it's great to see people change or evolve like that. It's I guess we're kind of always growing and learning as we go as handicappers, Doug.
No question about it. And, and these, when there's, I don't know if it's desperate times, but when things are different, you got to be able to go with the flow. And among the expressions you can use is adapt or die.
Yeah, exactly.
Adapt. Come up with something.
And handicappers like us, we always have to adapt because there's rule changes, and obviously the books get smart on things, and we have to find different angles and edges, and it's just not the same as it was 10 years ago, and it's never the same as it was 10 years ago. So that kind of keeps the job interesting. One thing that hasn't changed, well, it's changed a little, but it was still there for us, was the NFL draft. Doug, what an interesting experience watching this thing. Everybody's at home. Roger Goodell's like in his nice little Goodell cave, you might want to call it, and right. It went way better than I thought. What was your opinion on it?
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, Goodell actually looked less uptight, so that was kind of, that was good.
No one around him to boo him, I guess.
Right. With that, well, I think right on the opening, they somehow introduced booing. I think he said so. He says if he felt at home. So I thought that was.
I thought that they planned it was nice. Yeah, the fact that was cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So but I think that how they got everything organized. I mean, I thought it was really good. There's no question that the excitement level of, doing it live now and everything else, but I can't imagine that they could have done it any better than what they did. So I was very impressed how everybody put it together, and it was just well done across the board. I enjoyed it. I'm not a big draft watcher, just in general, but I certainly watched more this year. Ended up having to write quite a few articles about it, so just wanted to see what was going on. And like I said, I thought it was good.
Also, I thought that they had more cameras on more families and obviously candidates that got drafted this year, even deep into Friday and into Saturday. You saw them, and it was great seeing their reaction, even if they're in the fifth round.
Yes,
you still had that poor, like Jake Fromm kind of guy that was pushed out really late, but eventually when they get drafted, they feel relieved, they're happy, and they have a lot to prove. So I thought that was cool, and I'm not sure if I liked just the big crowd in front of Goodell and the people sitting in the stands more than I had liked it this time. So I agree. Fantastic job, man. That was awesome. And I do bet the draft. For me, day one didn't go well. I was saved at the very end on the 32nd pick because I took Taylor. I was betting against DeAndre Swift as a running back to be the first running back drafted. I had Taylor, I had Dobbins, and I had the field at plus 900, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire happened to hit that plus 900, which helped me a ton, and I was only down a couple units. And then day two happened. Was fantastic. I pretty much hit everything. Buffalo went defense at plus 160, which I got early, and Houston went defense, and that was a big one. And then I made the bet that Gross Matos would be the first D end taken, so that definitely helped and made it profitable for me. So was a little bit upset though the first day with some of the wide receivers getting picked and some of the things not going well for me. Did you end up making any plays?
Yeah, I did. And, the day one, I think it's really, really hard. I mean, just because there's so many factors that come into play that you can't even begin to, try and comprehend, understand. The offensive lineman, is supposed to be a good class of offensive linemen for sure, but it wasn't, there was like four main guys, and, the over-under was 5.5, and all of a sudden 7 are taken. Okay. And some of it was that, how these things go when a series of guys get taken, all of a sudden those behind say, geez, I wonder if we should be looking at this guy.
Right.
And so then that changes the whole dynamic of what goes on. So that's what I thought that was what happened there. The quarterback situation is always volatile in the first round, so that works against you. For me, I had a losing day, but I had a couple of decent ones with Okudah from Detroit going the third choice, and I had over on the wide receivers. But as you just said, though, it came back big time the second day, and I actually had never really bet the second day. I'm not a huge draft person like some of these guys, that want to be the Mel Kipers of the world and have, 255 picks and see how well they do. I don't have the time nor the energy to want to do that. But the being able to look at what happened on day one and go to day two, there was some great options there. Swift being the first running back taken, and then also on the over under with him on the in terms of where he'd be drafted. I think it was 38.5 as I recall. Mm-hmm. McKinney, the first safety, and like you for different players at different positions in the second round. Bills, Bears, and Steelers were all winners for me, so I was happy.
Yeah. It's second. I think round two was more like a book. Round one, a little bit crazy, and I had great line value like Tampa Bay. Arizona. I thought they should be picking an offensive line because they brought that defense in there, and then they went and drafted Simmons. Kind of surprised me a little bit. That was one of my losers. Another way I looked at it is it's not like what you think should happen is going to happen. I actually have a strong opinion, and I always do because I put research in. I think teams should be doing this, and then they don't follow it. They do something different, and whether they're right or wrong, I would have played wide receivers starting in the second round because they were so deep. Why would you grab a wide receiver that's the biggest potential to be a bust position is wide receiver? They don't bring it to Super Bowls, as you know. And then 6 of them went off the board. I was actually one of the guys that went under 5.5 and then, paid for it later. So in my opinion, when you play the draft, you have to put what you think should happen lower than some of these mock drafts because the mock drafts are saying what the teams are going to do. They put a little bit more research into it. So I usually draw a good balance, and it's worked out. Thank God I'm up a little bit, but nothing spectacular. It was a fun draft to watch, so real excited made me really excited about the NFL season.
Well, if you're gonna if you think you're gonna get rich betting the draft, you might want to try something else. That's kind of my general thought process on it. I mean, it's fun. It's something to do. It's entertainment, but beyond that, from in a pure betting sense, like making NFL picks or college football picks, completely different animal for sure.
Absolutely. Well, with that, why don't we go into a little bit more into this NFL draft? Wanted to talk about the top 5 teams who had the best draft. Doug, do you have a list of who you thought were our biggest winners?
Yes, unquestionably, and we can go back and talk about whatever you'd like from there. But for me, Dallas was number one far and away. I can't say I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 necessarily, but to me, the big winner was Dallas. I also thought Buffalo did well. I liked what Baltimore did. I like what Minnesota did, and I like what Cleveland did. So that would be my top 5. Dallas for sure at number 1, and I'll just say it this way. They addressed every single need that they had. They needed something in defensive line, secondary, center, and wide receiver. They covered all across the board. I thought Dallas and Jerry Jones got a lot of heat, and deservedly so, for a lot of different drafts. This one, I thought they got right.
Yeah. CeeDee Lamb was their first pick, and he was one of my top 3 receivers. I mean, I was surprised that they didn't go defense first, but as long as it works out, that's a good thing. I don't have Dallas in my top 5, but I thought they did pretty well. Who did you have second?
Like I said, no particular order, but I like what Buffalo did. Now, I'm also kind of combining, though, Buffalo with some other factors. And, for example, I'm going to put in the trade, to get Stephon Diggs, trading, for some players to make that happen. They got a deep threat that's going to help Josh Allen. They did lose Jordan Williams and Shaq Lawson on defense, and I thought those were important losses. But at the same time, they picked up Mario Addison by free agency, and I also like even though he's not a great athlete, he's a playmaker. And I still having a hard time saying this guy's name, from Iowa, AJ Epinesa is yes. With him, I thought he was an excellent college player. I think he'll do well in the pros, and I also liked them picking up Zach Moss as a running back. So I think just across the board, I like what they did, and I think they further narrowed the gap to catch New England.
Moss is a sneaky player. I thought he was very good, and it was really interesting for where he was going to show up, and he did show up at Buffalo. I'm sure Gore's gone. They got Devin Singletary there, but TJ Yeldon, he's not that much of a backup. So yeah, like what they did there. And you're right. If you count Diggs as a draft pick, because that's how they traded him and got Diggs, then you really like Buffalo, and they're definitely in your top 5. I like Epinesa. He did a great job at Iowa, and he was projected as a top 3 edge rusher. The thing about this draft is edge rushers weren't exactly flying off the board like they have in past drafts, So when you can get the 3rd best edge guy, according to a lot of draft rankings, you did pretty well in the 2nd round at pick 54. So 100% agree with you. And I thought Jake Fromm was undervalued. He got, 167th pick in the 5th. Buffalo, if something happens to Kyle Allen, he could step in. He's a pretty experienced guy, threw a lot of passes at Georgia. At one point he was projected to be one of the top 5 draft picks about a few years back. Then he had that bad year last year, but I kind of forgive him for that. He had some wide receiver injuries, and I'm not huge on his coach, so I agree with you there. Who do you have next?
I have Baltimore. There's a fair amount of speculation that Baltimore's going to come back to the pack a little bit this year, and that may or may not be true. 13-3, that's not easy to duplicate year after year, but I still think they got a lot of ability on that team, and they had some losses, but I think they're able to replace C.J. Mosley with Patrick Queen from LSU. He didn't play a ton of football, but if you watch their games, I mean, your eyes were glued to him playing linebacker. So I really liked what they did. I think that they made some wise moves also to get a number of second-round picks, and my favorite by far was Dobbins of Ohio State. And I'm telling you, you got Dobbins and Lamar Jackson running that option. Oh my God, we talk about home run ability. I mean, I think that was I like Dobbins over Taylor from Wisconsin anyways, but I think in terms of a fit to be on the right team at the right time, wow, I think that was a smart move. So I really like what Baltimore did overall.
Oh, while you're picking fights with me now, taking Dobbins over Taylor like that, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, man.
The one thing though, you have to consider. I look at it this way: consider all of what happened. Taylor was an excellent running back at Wisconsin, no question about it. But those fumbles, in terms of moving forward, can fumbles be solved? Absolutely. And if he does, fantastic. He should have an excellent career, and he actually might have a longer career than Dobbins. Just overall by size and everything else. But the fact of the matter is those. It's hard to overlook those fumbles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely one of his biggest things there. And he can't fumble in the NFL like that. The running backs do not last long enough, and they do not get forgiven if they do fumble like that. One thing I love about Taylor, of course, was his measurables, running faster than most wide receivers in his 40. And he did fantastic in the combine. He did everything. I think Dobbins and Swift only participated in a few things that they were able to do well at. Taylor beat them both in speed and in size. He's a bigger guy than both of them. He outweighs them by 14 to 16 pounds. So him doing that says NFL, and he would have been more of a Saquon Barkley spot if he didn't fumble. I would have had him ranked at high end, but the fumbles definitely killed him there. I had Barkley, Dobbins, and then Swift on my running backs. The thing about Baltimore, getting back to that, I don't ever want to say that they had a bad draft because they always prove me wrong. The system over there is fantastic with Harbaugh. I wonder why they got Dobbins so early, and he's great, when they drafted like Justice Hill pretty early last year. It seems like they're getting these early running backs. So what does that mean for Justice Hill? I don't know. It can't be good, because they have Ingram over there and a couple other guys, Edwards and stuff. So that's interesting to me. But at the same time, Lamar Jackson, the way he runs that offense, they're so close last year. And if they didn't, Lamar Jackson had that little hiccup in the playoffs, they could have been your Super Bowl champs. But no, I can't disagree with Baltimore. Who do you have next?
I got Minnesota, and more so the fact that they lost a lot of players, but I thought they were smart and they picked up. They ended up with 14 total picks. And now they had several holes, and I can't say that, I'm more looking at the whole package and trying to see what goes forward here. And so, but with the 14 picks, that helps them fill a lot of roster spots and that have opened up. And the other part I'm looking at this is to say, and again, I'm not saying this is going to be a draft to where, you're going to say, oh, these guys are going to be memorable, anything like that. But having all those picks and being able to utilize that gives them more depth than what they had. And then the other point then going forward is how I'm looking at this is if they in future years then start drafting players at certain positions. So maybe they took somebody right now that's in the fifth round, sixth round, even the fourth round. And in a year or two, they bring in somebody else that's a better player. They've had a nice stopgap in order to move forward. So instead of just bottoming out, okay, which they potentially could have done, and except for acquiring more different players. I think that they did a nice job with that. And I really like Jefferson from LSU to be in the slot. I think he's going to catch a ton of balls from Kirk Cousins this year.
Minnesota is in my top 5 as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go over mine quickly. So I would guess that leaves Cleveland next.
I did like Cleveland. You're absolutely correct. And what I liked about them is that, again, part of it is working some free agency. They picked up Conklin at tackle and Austin Hooper at tight end. And then they got another tackle with Wills and Grant Delpit from LSU. I had him the second best safety going in the draft this year.
Yeah, 100%. And Cleveland is also in my top 5. So I'll just quickly go over that so I could piggyback with you on Cleveland there. Number 1, I had the Miami Dolphins. And what's funny about my top 5, before I get into it, is these teams are bad franchises in general. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that they're going to do well with these. They could ruin these teams. But a lot of these teams also have new coaches and new GMs. So we'll see if they change their franchise over. But when I say that these teams had the best draft, it does not mean they're going to be an 8+ win team at all. I'm just saying that I thought they got the most out of their draft, and some teams that only had a few picks did pretty well, and they can't be in the top because they didn't have a ton of picks. So kind of like Buffalo for me, because I couldn't count Diggs. But with Miami, I love the fact that they got Tua without having to trade up there. They called San Diego, LA Chargers bluff on that. They stayed at 5, and they were able to retain that later first-round pick. I love that. I love the fact that they had 11 picks. That's a ton of picks in the draft. And I like their tackle, Austin Jackson from USC, a lot. I thought he was the guy that really stuck out to me from UFC. And at the very end of their picks, in the 7th round, they got a quarterback that is not going to play quarterback, but he is a football player, and I watched him play. Malcolm Perry from Navy. He single-handedly beat teams last year, and without him, Navy wouldn't even been a 500 team. So I like what they did there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Across the board. It's always, and you're absolutely right. It's hard to look at some of these teams that aren't going to project well. I mean, they're 2 or 3 years away. So, to evaluate in any draft, let's face it. I mean, this is just all conjecture for the most part, and so you don't know what's going to happen. Now you get 3 years out or 3 years from today, if we're having this conversation, nobody ever really goes back and talks about that much, other than if teams are successful. But, it's a very difficult thing, and it's so subjective as to how and what you think. And, every opinion will vary. Now but with your Miami choice, I could not disagree whatsoever. I think you're definitely on point with everything that you had to say there.
Yeah, 100% conjecture. Like you said, you're never going to boost a team's win total by three wins over a draft. And if so, you are definitely doing it wrong. But going by what you said about Cleveland, they're my number 2. Cleveland picked up very nicely. And a little bit in the offseason, too, they got Jarek Wills, and he was my top-rated offensive tackle, so I was happy that they got him. And then, of course, Jack Conklin in the offseason from Tennessee. They got 2 fantastic tackles, and they really had offensive line issues. As you know, they ignored that. Baker Mayfield's going to be a little bit older. Now they're going to be a little bit more protective there. Like you said, Grant Delpit from USC was a steal. Jacob Phillips from LSU late in the 3rd, really liked him. And a really interesting one at the end, getting Donovan Peoples-Jones in round 6 gives them some depth now behind Landry and some of their receivers in case they get injured. I thought Peoples-Jones was a little bit better than his draft showed because I didn't think Shea Patterson did that well for him. So
now, and to your point too, is that with him, you actually have somebody that might run a route.
Yeah, that's true too. Run a real route. Now, Cleveland, a lot of drama there with OBJ and stuff, but you never know what's going to happen. He's a little bit of a head case. Getting Peoples-Jones is a nice insurance policy there, and I thought he would have had a better college career if he had a better quarterback. Number 3, I have the New York Jets, and I love the first 4 picks getting that big tackle in Mekhi Becton with the measurables. 364 pounds, running a 5.140 in the combine. At that weight, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not even near that weight, but I'm not even sure if I can run a 5.140 or if I ever did, because I never really ran a lot of 40s. I didn't play track, but it's more into baseball. But I thought that was just amazing seeing that big guy do that, and that says NFL all over him if he can get his head together. I also like them getting, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in this draft, Denzel Mims. He was definitely top for me. He went way later. He had the 6'3" height. He's got the 4.3 speed, and I was shocked that Mims fell that far. And they also found that safety, an edge rusher kind of in the middle there too. So I like what the Jets did. Not sure if their coach is any good, but we'll see what happens there, Doug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I honestly don't have a strong opinion on the Jets. There's nothing there for me that really stood out. Probably, I guess I'd say above average. Just, Mims, comes from a good program, as you said, in Baylor, and Becton as their offensive tackle. I think he was a good pick. Again, that position was so deep this year, in tackles. Mm-hmm. That ended up being probably among the biggest stories, certainly of the draft, and how the run on those players across the board. So yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Number 4, I have the Cincinnati Bengals it's mostly because of what Joe Burrow did at LSU, but that does not mean it's going to translate into the NFL as quickly as people think. I want to kind of put a warning out there, but Joe Burrow, the kid worked his way into what you saw. His accuracy on the run was fantastic. He knew when to tuck and run it, which that's going to last a little while in the NFL, but at the same time, it's not going to be sustainable, so I worry about that. But at the same time, he kind of adjusted to the RPO game, and that was an amazing thing that Joe Brady brought in to LSU when he came from the New Orleans Saints. He did probably the best job at offensive coordinator there now. I also like T. Higgins a lot at pick 33. In my opinion, he was the second best wide receiver in the draft. I've seen him play many games for Clemson. I've seen when Clemson beat teams like Alabama with T. Higgins. The guy was an absolute force. So I like that. My problem with Cincinnati is they didn't properly address their offensive line in free agency or the draft. Joe Burrow might be running for his life, but just because Joe Burrow was the number 1 consensus pick out of every single board, I put him at number 4. Any thoughts on Cincinnati?
Yeah, I actually like the 2 picks as well, and I 100% agree. The offensive line, they seem to have a plan going forward, and that's just what they're going to do, and they're not going to deviate from it. So get your franchise quarterback, get him some help at wide receiver. The defense, has limitations, but it's not horrible. So let's just play the process, and see where we can go from there. And I think they just decided to address some other needs, even though there are some linemen they could have taken. It's their choice. I can't fault them for what they did.
Absolutely. And number 5 is, like I said earlier, agree with you on the Minnesota Vikings. How can you have 15 picks in the draft and not have to have them in your top 5? I mean, they can just get one of these guys by mistake's going to do good, right? That is a ton of picks. And Justin Jefferson is a fantastic receiver. He was just another one of LSU's guys. And now I went to pick them first because I went to pick any wide receiver first, but I don't have a problem with them. They really needed wide receiver with Diggs gone. I guess he was a little bit of a head case over there and probably needed a change. Everyone does. But just the crazy amount of picks that they had, I certainly like what they did. Edge rusher James Lynch from Baylor, I think, is a little bit underrated too. I think he's going to do a great job. And I got a hot take for you on Minnesota, and it's a super hot take because it's like one of those lottery tickets. I think that Nate Stanley from Iowa is eventually going to start this year. I think Cousins is going to be booed out, and I think that Stanley starts. What are your thoughts on that?
I could say I disagree. I guess I could go that direction. I am not a Nate Stanley guy. I'm just gonna I'll just get that out there. he has decent arm strength. I just think he's a so-so athlete. I'm sorry. I'm not on board with you on that one. I'm not I'm just not a Nate Stanley guy. That kind of caught me off guard with that one. I mean, that's
well, here's the thing. Here's my thing. Maybe whenever the game's not at 1:00 Eastern time, that they play Nate Stanley, because there was never been a quarterback worse than Kirk Cousins that played anywhere away from that time. So maybe what if if they did that? Yep. Now, I like Nate Stanley's size, and he destroyed the tomato cans of college football, but couldn't ever quite get it done against the big teams. But at the same time, he was always in those games. So I have a feeling that he could start just because of the hate for Cousins. I have a lot of Viking friends. It's not good. So it's my hot take.
I mean, that they're with Cousins. I mean, there's he was overpaid, but what is their option? That was, and even taking a quarterback, you can't once again, you can't say they're wrong, for taking a quarterback. So you know what, if the guy picks up some checks, and if he's willing to improve and drop a few pounds and just improve his athleticism more, hey, you might be right.
All right, fantastic. Well, let's do the other end of the spectrum real quick. Let's look at the bottom feeders of this draft, my man. The 5 teams that did the worst job. And don't worry, you're not going to hurt my feelings, Doug. You go ahead and fire away.
Okay, well, I had a hard time coming up with 5, so I have 3 in particular, and the 2 that I would say 3 really stood out to me. Number 1, but 4 and 5, I'd go Raiders for doing a poor job. I think taking 3 wide receivers are your first 4 picks when you have a defense that is average at best is not great, and the Atlanta Falcons took too many players in the first couple of picks that they could have gotten later. So that's what I think on those 2 teams. Now, I am going to actually, first of all, I'm going to shock the living daylights out of you, and that's the nice way to put it. A team that I think did the absolute worst was the Green Bay Packers.
I thought that was coming.
Yep. It just was. That was I understand the organizational point of view, okay? But no matter what, any team that has a window of opportunity, you just don't basically ignore it. And I am certainly not convinced that Aaron Rodgers will be an effective quarterback at 40 years old. I know that's what he said he wants to play till, but I don't see that. I think the injuries that he suffered before last year, I think those are going to continue to be a problem. And I do believe at some point he will be injured again, and he'll miss a significant amount of the season. How you don't get defensive line help and wide receiver help is beyond my comprehension. Jordan Love, you can say whatever you want about him, and I could go on this for half an hour, but I just, and it's not even, I would, about any team I would feel this way. I mean, you have this window to get to the Super Bowl, and, there's since 1960, there has only been 2 teams that will have had 2 quarterbacks in back-to-back years that are going to be Hall of Famers. Joe Montana and Steve Young was one. They've won 5 Super Bowls. The Packers are going to be 2 with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. They have 2 Super Bowls. It's a really lost opportunity, and I understand that they think they got something else possibly going on here. They have some wide receivers. They had 3 wide receivers that missed, I think, at least 7 or 8 games last year. But if all those guys coming back they're enthusiastic about, however, you would not take one of those guys over one of the first 8 receivers taken in this year's draft.
Go ahead.
No, in a nutshell, so I think they did nothing to help their case. Absolutely nothing. And their defense, I firmly believe, will be worse than it was this past year. And it wasn't great last year. It was 19th overall, or 18th overall, and they had the worst defense going in the playoffs. I think their defense will be worse. I cannot see the Packers getting anywhere close to 13 wins. They might win the division, but they are not a Super Bowl contender.
So I have 2 of those for sure on my bottom 5. And yes, the Green Bay Packers, I can go forever about them. And I think there's some reasons why under the cover here that I'm going to throw out there. when I get to them of why Love was picked. It's a little bit similar to the Eagles as well, why they went with Hurts. But great points, Doug, 100%. Packer fans are a little bit confused why that happened. My 5 worst picks or worst drafts start with, I'll start with number 28, and I have the Chicago Bears at number 28 here. Part of that was because they didn't have a lot of picks, and I can't help that. If I'm going to reward teams because they had 11 picks, 11 had 15 picks like the Vikings, I can't say it's fine just to have a few picks. They had 2 second-round picks, 3 fifth-round picks, and 2 seventh-round picks. That's not enough. And you can say it's because they got Mac, whatever, but I don't factor that in when it comes to analyzing the draft. They didn't get any offensive line help, and they really needed a tackle late. I think that not only did Mitch not only was he not accurate, but they couldn't run the ball. They were getting stuffed really bad. And Pro Football Focus has them only ranked 25th in offensive lines. They didn't address that at all in the offseason or in the draft. They didn't really need a tight end. They had 9 on the roster until they picked Cole Kmet from Notre Dame. What I will say is at least Cole Kmet was the top tight end, according to the analysts and the whole draft. So at least they got a position with a second rounder with that's ranked as the first guy to go. But, at the same time, I don't think that Mitch is going to be able to throw the ball well if he doesn't have any time. So I was a little bit upset they didn't try to go O-line. They did need a cornerback. At least they got Jalen Johnson there from Utah. I thought he's a nice big size, good speed, and he always took the number 1 guys in the Pac-12. I like that. And they got a shot with Darnell Mooney from Tulane, who ran his the third best 40 in the draft at 4.38. But at the same time, nothing to be too excited about, and the lack of picks. And they got some guys from like Division II schools on their 7th round. I'm going to have to give them number 28. Did you look at the Bears at all?
Yeah, that they were my 3rd worst on there. All of your points, I agree with. Now, I did take into consideration the Mac trade. Just my observation as to how I view it. I agree. They didn't have a lot of picks, but they didn't seem to do a lot. I do like Cole Kmet, and the one thing I do like about him is that. And what they're lacking at that position, and Jimmy Graham's certainly not going to give them a lot of this anyways, but he's more of a playmaker. And so I think they need a playmaker position. The thing I wonder about what Coach Nagy is thinking about this, I really wonder if they're going to want to use more 2 tight ends to improve the blocking scheme just in general, and utilize and force teams to have to use, their 5th corner or 4th corner or a safety to cover their tight ends, which can create some mismatches. And so maybe that helps Trubisky get better in terms of making shorter throws. Now, I'm not saying I'm agreeing with you. I don't think he's particularly accurate, and that was not a mystery coming in, but at least a shorter throw is easier to make than a longer throw. So that's the only thing I can think of as to why this, fixation with the tight ends, this off season, just in general.
Yeah, no one's going to off season. No one was going to pay Jimmy Graham $8 million. He bid against himself, and it's because he was with the Saints 7-8 years ago. I don't know what the hell he's doing. Eric Ebron went less money, and he's 6 years younger. It just blows my mind. Why don't you just resign Gabriel? It's not like anybody's trying to get him for a ton of money. Instead, they just wanted to go young in the slot with Darnell Mooney, try to beat the linebacker there in the slot. But I don't know if they need to go that direction. I'm just not overly impressed with my team, the Bears there. Number 2, ranked 29th, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. And the way the Eagles went about this draft is strange to me. They first draft a wide receiver that would have fell to them in the 2nd or 3rd round anyway, I think. I think Rager, I liked him at TCU. And I do remember 2 years ago when he played Ohio State, he was the reason that they kind of jumped him, and he was very fast. Ohio State didn't prepare well for him. But this is also still mostly Big 12 defenses that he gets his stats on, and TCU definitely didn't blow me away. I thought he was a good receiver, but I wouldn't have drafted him in the first round. Absolutely not. I would have got somebody else. Maybe I do like, their offensive line is great, but they could have got some more depth there, and they need some secondary. So I don't know why they did that. Jalen Hurts, the number 2 pick there blows my mind. And when I watch him, the reason Alabama kind of shed him was because they know Tua can kind of check down and read more defenses. Jalen would read one, he would take off with his feet, great athlete, but doesn't necessarily transfer to the NFL. Under Lincoln Riley, he looked good, but if you remember some of those Oklahoma games, he looked really bad for a half or a quarter.
Yep.
It was just really, really sporadic there. I think he's a project like Love for the Packers, and I don't know why he went so early. And what does that say to Carson Wentz? You just paid him. He's got a lot of years on his contract left, and you got Jalen Hurts that wants to be a starter right there. I think that throws some strangeness to this team, and I thought that they could have just got a backup instead of going so early on a project that could be a bust, like Jalen Hurts. I mean, if he's in the Wildcat, I'm not going to be too worried about him throwing the ball the first year. I'm thinking he's running it, So,
right.
So that didn't make any sense, and it sends a message to the team. But my theory is Wentz can't finish a year ever. Maybe they're really that pissed about him. I don't know. It costs them a lot of money if they're going to shed Wentz next year, but maybe that's part of it. I do like the offensive tackles they grabbed late from Auburn, though, so not a huge loss for Philly. Any thoughts on Philly?
Yeah, I actually had them second worst, so we're definitely on the same page here. I think, as I agree, Rager at 21 was a reach. Decent receiver, no question, but certainly I think that's too high. Hurts just, obviously, Wentz, there's concerns about him, and having a younger backup isn't a bad idea, and they like to move the pocket a lot, in their offense and stuff. So that, it was no question I wouldn't have taken him second round. Nonetheless, I see a little bit of their logic, but, I can't say I agree with it either. And Davian Taylor, who they took a guy in the third round who would have been available in the fifth. So, no, nothing there to like about Philadelphia at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, there you go, man.
Now, tell me who your next two were.
Green Bay Packers is
Okay.
Is number 30, and I know we're kind of crunched on time here. I'll speed it up. The Packers were just like you said. I'm wondering if Matt LaFleur doesn't trust Rodgers enough for the amount of money that he makes. If you look at Rodgers' QBR, it's in the bottom half of the NFL 2 years ago, and even worse, like bottom 23, 24, I think last year. His completion percentage was horrible the last 2 years. And you look at the amount of money he makes, maybe LaFleur's thinking about guys like Lamar Jackson and guys like Deshaun Watson, Mahomes, making much less on rookie contracts, yet making such a big splash in the NFL. So I wonder that. And I don't know about A.J. Dillon in the second round. I'm like, why the hell are you drafting a running back, second round? It's like everyone expects you to get wide receivers to help Rodgers. I don't even know if they drafted a wide receiver. I don't think they did. So, it kind of blew my mind the way they went about this draft. It's almost like a middle finger to Rodgers, and I don't know if that's the right thing to do or the message you should send. At least when they drafted Rodgers, when they had Favre, Rodgers was projected first round. Love, or early in the first round, actually, he was projected. Love was looked at as a project, and he kind of fell out of most mock drafts in the first round, and he had a 20 touchdown to 17 interception ratio in the Mountain West Conference. So now I know he did have Gary Anderson, a terrible coach at Utah State after Matt Wells left, but and he did do well with Matt Wells, but you never want to look at regression like that. So really curious about that, my man.
Yeah. No, all I was going to say is I saw this today. I thought was the remarkable. So Aaron Rodgers, long career at the Green Bay Packers. Do you know how many touchdown passes he's thrown to a number one pick? One.
Oh, that's
Mercedes Lewis.
Holy cow! Yeah, they draft I guess they draft their wide receivers late, and their tight ends.
So yeah. Conversely, Peyton Manning, I believe, was 273.
That's a big difference with Marvin Harrison there and Reggie Wayne, right?
Yes, but isn't that, that kind of tells you the philosophy difference, and and the thing with the Packers, to your point, I think I don't know so much if it's a finger to Rodgers, but it definitely tells you where they're going, and they're going to be a running team, whether Rodgers is there or when he's gone, as long as this is their head coach. I mean, this is what they're going to do. They're going to run the ball, do play action. That's the offense, and if somebody doesn't like it, that's too bad. That's what they're going to do.
I think they're trying to be the Ravens. I think that's what they're doing.
Yep, that San Francisco, the Ravens, following that thought process.
The power offense. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that maybe it'll work for him. We'll see. It's all speculation. So number 31, Pittsburgh Steelers, and normally the Steelers are so awesome in the draft. It really was hard for me to put them there, and they might make me look bad here. But I thought Chase Claypool wasn't where he should have been drafted. The fact that they didn't have a first-round pick kind of made me have to drop them as well. I thought Denzel Mims, Tyler Johnson, and Van Jefferson were better than Chase Claypool when they went with a wide receiver their second round. They didn't really get a quarterback to replace Big Ben. What if Big Ben's not that healthy? What if he gets hurt quickly this year again? I mean, I think they found out that Mason Rudolph wasn't so good when your offensive line is ranked so high and you have some pretty good skill positions, and they say they need some more depth at skill position. Well, not too many impactful guys that they got at skill position. So I don't understand their third round Alex Highsmith from Charlotte either. I thought that was a huge reach for a guy from Charlotte. I wasn't too high in the Steelers. Did you look at them?
Yeah, I did. And in a general sense, I will agree with what you're saying. The only thing about Claypool that I do like potentially in their offense is that, with his size, again, in the slot, he can be a big asset to, move the chains, and then inside the red zone. So if that's kind of what their thinking was, I can understand it.
All
so,
right.
yeah.
All right. Fantastic. My very last one, worst team picking in the draft they have a beautiful new stadium, and it's black and silver, and it's the Las Vegas Raiders. And I don't know what they were doing getting Henry Ruggs right there at the Forest wide receiver. They fell in love with his speed, kind of like John Ross at Cincinnati, except Ross was actually faster. Maybe the fact that he played for Alabama, but do you know he was even the second most impactful wide receiver at Alabama? He was the third most in yards, third most in catches, third most in touchdowns. And he's not a number one guy. He thrives when he's being ignored. And Alabama knows that. He's the third guy, and he's wide open, and that's why he catches wide open balls. The guy's 180 pounds, soaking wet. That was a huge stretch for a guy that's not going to play number one receiver because he's not going to be a good number one receiver. I don't know if he does hot routes and things like that. So very upset with that. Their second pick, Damon Arnett from Ohio State, was projected to be like the 10th cornerback coming out. So, I like the fact that he was good at Ohio State, but when the other draft projectors are having him like a third round kind of guy, third, fourth, maybe late second, I'm not going to like their other first pick that they made there. So, not liking what the Raiders did. They draft a running back in Lynn Bowden from Kentucky in the third round, and they just got Josh Jacobs. They got Richardson there. Lynn Bowden from Kentucky? Really? Scratch my head on that one as well, man. So the fact that they didn't even get a quarterback in the offseason tells me they're going with Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota, which I don't think they're leading anybody in any Super Bowl time soon. Last thoughts on the Raiders, Doug?
Yeah, I as I mentioned earlier, I thought they had a generally a lousy draft. I actually do like Ruggs as a receiver, and I understand your logic is to that. But it's it's been a Raider tradition, like a Mark Davis bad haircut, to take a fast guy. Okay, so that's just what they do, and and in today's NFL, you look at what Tyreek Hill, he might not have to catch. He can get. Let's put it this way: he can catch 50 balls, and if he gets 12 touchdowns, you got to say he did it. They got the right guy. So if that's the direction they go, that's fine. But as I mentioned earlier, the defensive problems not being addressed, not sure how that works out.
And the offensive line. So we'll see if Carr and Mariota can get the ball out to Ruggs when he's running those routes. They did have a guy named Amari Cooper recently as well, and they let him go. So real interesting there. Well, all right, man, real quick. Horse racing has been fun, actually. It's hard sport to bet. You've been thriving well in it. How's it going so far with the ponies, Doug?
Yeah, it's going very well. Well, put it this way, I was like a lot of other people. I had a little more, let's just say, general working knowledge in a lot of cases with horse racing, but primarily what I like to do was like go out with friends, either to the racetrack. In fact, like you used to live in the Midwest, I'd love to go to Arlington. That was always a big treat. The ones here is not so much fun. It's kind of a dumpy track here in Phoenix, but like OTB, I went fairly often. But when everything shut down, I had to make a decision. I said, okay, what am I going to do? So I basically spent 6 hours a day going through and teaching myself and learning about horse racing. I am no way professing myself to be some absolute horse guru. I'm not that. And I actually don't have any ambition to be that. But I do like horse racing. I figured out some stuff, and I've been able to apply it, keeping things, in my opinion, pretty simple, and just going from there. And it's working out. Well, in a nutshell.
Guru or not, you're doing well. So what do you look for when you're handicapping some races? Give a few pointers that you look at on the card, and what's the average spend per race that under your recommendations?
Sure. Okay. Well, let's start with what I look for. One of the things that I did right away, and I used to always buy it when I went to the racetrack, was the daily racing form. So that's a very useful tool. Things to start how I view it on a daily basis now. First of all, I select certain tracks. Okay, keeping it real limited. There's not that many tracks that are open, by the way, also. But even if there were, select tracks. Keeps your focus of your information more limited. From there, I look for the top jockeys at a particular track, as long as the top trainers. Okay, you can have a horse that has a lot of talent, but if he's not put in the best position to win, or by training, or have the right jockey who can understand how different horse temperaments work, it's a waste of time. So you got those are two things that I look for right off the bat. From there, I'm just going to go through these points. If you want to come back to one, I can go through it a little bit more with you. But I look at speed ratings. I think that's very important. I look at horses that go up or down in class. Okay, so if a horse goes down in class, why did it? If he's going up, why is it? Horses coming off long layoffs. Changes in jockeys or trainers in terms of how things switch, changing back and forth, going from dirt to grass or the other way around, or also distances. Some horses, and ultimately end up being better sprinters. Some are better at longer distances, which relates to the next thing, which is one turn or two turns. One turns primarily is like a 6 furlong race. 2 turns would be a mile or more. So I look at that. I also look at closers and front runners, look at breeding factors, where a horse, for example, let's say, I'll just make this one quick, a horse that has 5, say, brothers and sisters or siblings, and in each case they have won during their careers. This horse is the only one that hasn't, but he's consistently finished second or third. Well, you know what? Maybe it's his time. So you can go step up to the plate on that one. And then also other things relating to post position and comparing the latest results of that horse, and then also taking in consideration what the current odds are.
Fantastic, man. That is a lot of things to look at, and a lot of the things that I like to look at as well, but I'm certainly not a guru myself. As a matter of fact, I probably know less about horse racing than most other sports. I do it kind of for a pastime. I don't do it for any clients or anything. So in my opinion, you nailed everything, but one thing I do have a question. Do you look at the workouts? I don't know if you said that or not.
Yeah, I did not say workouts, and you know what? I just threw a lot of stuff out there, and the workouts certainly, they can be important. I just don't know. I haven't figured out how to quantify that in terms of end results. No question, if a horse, has some really strong workouts over a period of time, he sets himself up to do well, or vice versa. But I haven't been able to. It's information that's part of a package. I just don't know how, I just haven't figured out where to put it to where it makes perfect sense, and particularly workouts in they have what they call bullets, and how that relates to particularly longer races. That's why I've kind of, to this point anyways, kind of poo-pooed that a little bit more.
Right. I agree. I was going to say that a lot of the workouts, they're not pushing the horse that much. They don't want to hurt them. They don't want to them to throw a shoe, anything, it's
Yes.
It's dangerous. So I think
bleeding. Yeah. Bleeding's another thing, breaking blood vessels and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yep.
It's another part of it.
100%. So glad you mentioned that. So, and I know it's early, but the Arkansas Derby's coming up. I'm sure you're going to have a couple plays. I didn't really get a chance to look at the field. I don't think so either. But it's funny how they split it into 2 races, Doug. Lots of contenders. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, because of so many races, were canceled, and places where there'd be different races, bigger races that were leading up to the Kentucky Derby, which would have run this Saturday, of course, and so they had to come up with something, and of course they had a lot of entries, and so they have a point system, and they're going to award equal points in both categories, but one's a little bit stronger than the other, but it's adaptable at this point. So you have to be able to go along with it. And so you got a 14 race card on the Arkansas Derby on that day. And you had mentioned about how much to bet. If you're listening to this and you're new or more of a novice, I would be as conservative as humanly possible. Because the thing about horse racing, I think I mentioned this to you, Kia, before. It's a lot like being a major league hitter. Okay. If you hit 3 out of 10, okay, that's a good day. Okay. If you hit 2 out of 10, not so hot, but that's just the nature of horse racing. You have to be able to deal with losing, because you're going to lose a lot of races. So the conservative approach is the best approach, and or choose fewer races and set a budget. So if you got $50 to play with and you want to do a bunch of races, now you're talking about, roughly, not saying that, the most horse racing cards are around 10, you could do that, $5 a race. Then that's take what you can afford to lose. If you don't want to do as many races, now say you want to do 5, well, then you can bet $10 a race. Okay, instead, but stay within your budget. That's the number one thing, because in horse racing, you do this for a week, you can get buried in a hurry. And believe me, I know that. I've been through it. I've done it before. That's why it's tough.
Exactly. Small exacta boxes, only 50% try boxes, and things like that will get you a lot farther. You can go really deep in the hole if you start out, $40 a race, $50 a race. You can really dump a lot of money if luck's not going on your side. So I 100% agree with you there, my man. The fun part about this thing is you can go some big exotic plays, throw a couple 20 to 1s in there, and you can get a big payout with a 50-cent trifecta. It could be well into the $1,000 range, depending upon the odds of the horses. So, yeah, you can have fun with this thing with the smallest amount of money. So, just want to make sure people know that.
And another thing too, I've done this before, and you can actually even do this. Anyone can do this on Saturday. So, okay, this is going to be on television, either on FS1 or MSNBC on Saturday. And if you got some other buddies that want to do this, a real simple thing you can do is you take money, have somebody that's going to place the bets. So if you got, say, 4 or 5 guys, okay, everybody puts in $10, and you say on race 2 of that day, you put it on show. Okay, so then you have, let's just say, a 4 to 1 horse or even higher that finishes third, or if it obviously does better, but you get the show money. Well, all of a sudden you take that, and so if you got $50 and it comes in, well, your 50 now might turn into 150. Okay, or something, some other more larger number, maybe not quite as big, but then you can take that, and then if you feel comfortable, then let it ride. Okay, so just take your money. You have no more investment to make, and you go through. And if you happen to get lucky, and let's just say you hit 3, 4, maybe even 5 in a row, and you're letting it ride each time, your $10 investment now might be I'm not saying it will, but it could be multiple $100s. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's just something fun to do. So now you can watch it, you can see what you're doing, or, I've participated more and then adding a little bit into it then also. So, I mean, even if you go just as a nominal number is $25, if you plan, say, you know what, for $25, I'm more than willing to do this because that's what my liquor bill is from what I'm ordering in anyways, from someplace else. So just do that and have some fun doing it. So there's,
100%.
Number of ways to do this.
I love it. That makes total sense. You play with house money. You can even pocket that first investment you had and just have fun the rest of your day. Or or if you lose it, just do half of your bankroll on the first, then just kind of play real small throughout the day. It's fun. Arkansas Derby. It looks like the Baffert horses are going to be favored on the split. Race 11 and race 13. You got Nadal and Charlatan. I'm probably going to try to beat them with a certain type of exotic play, but I'll also use them so I don't get beat too bad. That's just kind of my style, the way I do it, and I'll throw out a free play most likely on the odds breakers for that. But at the same time, I hope that everyone has fun watching this race this weekend because there's not a lot going on. And
nope. Well, and that's what's good too because it's live sports. That's the other thing that's good about this.
Yeah, live sports better than betting on video games. Doug, thank you so much, my man. We are out of time. Doug, how can our listeners benefit from your knowledge and your plays coming up this weekend?
Yeah. So, for example, I do horse racing right now 6 days a week, and the number of plays will vary anywhere from 2 up to maybe as many as 7 or 8. It's only $15 a day at Docs, okay, to get any of these plays. It's a great deal. The regular price is $30, so it's basically 50% off, and it's available there. And you can also, all 7 days a week, I got a free play on my page at Docs as well. And again, the name is Doug Upstone, so you can check out that as well right now. And hey, again, the biggest thing, have fun with this. That's what I say with horse racing. Have fun. And for $15 for a cost, it's certainly not going to break the bank.
My friends, that was Doug Upstone from Doc Sports. Make sure you go check him out. He does a fantastic job, a very, very experienced handicapper. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet us or Doug. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the races this weekend and go get some winners.